Marcus Delane had never liked the silence that came after a long shift on New Lagos Station. The hum of the fusion cores still echoed faintly in his head as he walked down the narrow corridor toward the engineering bay. The lights flickered, dim gold against steel walls smudged with fingerprints and grease, signs of people working too hard for too little. He rubbed his hands together, breath visible in the chill. The temperature regulators had been acting up again. His locker stood near the far wall, dented and covered in old stickers, one reading "Born Free, Built Human." He popped it open, expecting the familiar sight of his heavy brown coat, the one his grandmother had given him before he left Earth. It wasn't there. He blinked, certain he'd missed it. He checked again, then again, opening the neighboring lockers just in case someone had moved it. Nothing. Only the echo of the metal door slamming back at him. Man, not today, he muttered under his breath. That coat wasn't just fabric. It was legacy. His grandma had sewn its inner lining with threads from her own mother's scarf. A way, she said, of keeping warmth in the bloodline. Losing it felt like losing a piece of himself. Marcus leaned against the wall, exhaling sharply. The chill bit through his work shirt, and he could already feel the cold creeping into his bones. It wasn't just physical. It was the kind of cold that reminded him how far from home he really was. He heard footsteps behind him. "Yo, Delane, you good?" It was Rico, another tech from the night shift, tall, with braids tied back, and a smile too tired to be fake. "Somebody took my coat," Marcus said, trying to sound casual but failing. Rico frowned. "Ain't nobody stealing clothes out here, man. Maybe it got moved." "Moved where? Into the vacuum?" "Relax, I'll ask around." Rico's voice softened. "You look like you ain't slept in a week. Go home, Marcus." Home. He almost laughed at the word. A rented pod, one window showing the red shimmer of Proxima B, and a half-broken heater that hissed all night. That wasn't home. As Rico left, Marcus stayed a while longer, staring at the empty hook. He thought about the last time he'd worn that coat, on a repair run outside the hull, where the station's magnetic field sang like a low hum across his bones. He remembered whispering to himself then, "You got this. You always got this." Now he wasn't sure. He started walking toward the exit, hands deep in his pockets, when a faint light flickered on his wrist terminal. "Motion alert. Sector G17 near the frost zone." He frowned. That area was supposed to be sealed after the cooling systems failed last cycle. No one should be there. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the ignore command, but then he saw the timestamp, just 2 minutes ago. Someone was definitely there. A thought crept in. What if that someone had his coat? He sighed, shaking his head. "I can't believe I'm doing this." He turned toward the frost zone, boots echoing on the metal floor. The further he went, the colder the air became. Pipes overhead dripped condensation like slow rain. The lights dimmed, replaced by the pulsing glow of emergency strips. Marcus rubbed his arms. "I better find a damn coat or a reason to stop caring." The motion signal blinked again, closer now, just beyond the sealed bulkhead. He keyed in an override. The door hissed open with a rush of frozen air that cut straight through him. He shivered, pulling his collar tight. Through the mist he saw footprints, small ones, barely visible against the frost-coated floor. They led deeper into the maintenance tunnels. For a moment instinct told him to turn back, but curiosity, that stubborn human spark, pushed him forward. He thought of his grandma's words. "Warmth ain't given, it's shared." Maybe, somewhere ahead, he'd find whoever had taken his coat. Or maybe he'd find something colder than he was ready for. Before we dive deeper into Marcus's strange discovery, make sure you're part of this journey. Subscribe and stay with us as the story unfolds. The air inside the frost zone burned with cold. Each breath Marcus took turned into vapor, hanging like ghosts before fading into the dark. The emergency lights barely worked here, casting long, trembling shadows that made the corridor feel endless. His boots crunched over ice crystals forming along the floor panels. The further he went, the quieter the world became, until all he could hear was his heartbeat and the faint hum of the station's dying systems. He followed the footprints carefully. They were smaller than his, lighter, maybe belonging to a child or something close. The trail bent around a collapsed vent, then disappeared behind a row of cryotanks. Marcus crouched, touching one of the prints. It was fresh. Whoever he was following was still close. He spoke softly, breath visible in the freezing air. "Hey, whoever's out here, this zone ain't safe. You need to come out." No answer. Only the distant drip of condensation hitting metal. He took a few steps forward, eyes scanning the dark. Then, from the corner of his vision, he saw movement, a flicker of motion behind a broken console. He froze. "All right," he muttered, voice steady but firm. "If you took my coat, we can talk about it. Just don't make me chase you through this freezer." Silence. Then a soft sound broke through the quiet. A low hum, almost like someone singing under their breath. The melody didn't sound human. It had rhythm but no words, rising and falling like wind through hollow glass. Marcus's pulse quickened. He turned slowly toward the sound, the beam of his wristlight trembling across frost-covered walls until it landed on a shape crouched near the corner. A figure wrapped in something dark. His coat. Marcus exhaled, relief mixing with irritation. "So, that's where you ran off with it." He took a cautious step closer. "Look, I don't want to start nothing. I just need my—" The light shifted, and he saw her face. The figure wasn't human. The skin shimmered faintly like thin ice catching starlight. Eyes large and bright blue, pupils expanding and contracting as if adjusting to his presence. She looked young, maybe late teens by human standards, though it was hard to tell. Her breathing came in sharp, trembling bursts, as if she'd been running for days. Marcus froze in place, his words stuck somewhere between surprise and disbelief. The alien girl clutched the coat tighter around something in her arms. For a second, he thought she was just shielding herself from the cold. Then he noticed the small bundle beneath the fabric, still fragile, and far too small to be anything but a child. His voice lowered to a whisper. "Is that a baby?" The girl didn't respond, only shifted her body slightly, revealing more of what she held. The sight made Marcus forget the cold entirely. It was an infant, its skin pale blue, nearly translucent, breath shallow, eyes closed. Frost clung to its lashes. The coat was wrapped around it like the last bit of warmth left in the world. Marcus stepped closer, instinct taking over. "That baby's freezing, let me help." The girl's head snapped up and she hissed, a sound between fear and warning. Her eyes glowed faintly in the low light. She backed against the wall, clutching the child tighter. Marcus raised both hands slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you, I swear. Just let me check on the kid." Her breathing quickened, mist puffing from her lips. The hum returned, softer this time, like a lullaby for the dying. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a memory of his grandmother holding him during storms back home, whispering warmth into his skin. He took another slow step forward. "I ain't your enemy," he said gently. "That coat's yours for now. But if we don't move, you and that baby won't make it through the hour." For a long moment, the alien girl didn't move. Then slowly she looked down at the infant and back at him. Her eyes softened. Marcus extended his hand, the cold biting his fingers raw. "Let me help." She hesitated, then nodded once. He didn't know it yet, but that single nod would change everything. The alien girl's nod came hesitant but clear, like the smallest crack in a wall of fear. Marcus stepped closer, careful not to startle her. The cold wrapped around them both, sharp and heavy. His breath shook in front of him as he crouched beside her, eyes fixed on the small bundle beneath his coat. He could see the infant's skin now, smooth but almost translucent, veins glowing faintly beneath the surface. Each tiny breath looked like a struggle. The baby's fingers twitched, curling weakly against the fabric. Marcus swallowed hard. "We gotta get this kid somewhere warm," he said quietly. "The med bay's closer than the main quarters." The girl didn't answer. She just stared at him, eyes wide, unblinking. Her face held that strange shimmer again, as though light itself bent differently on her skin. He tried again, voice softer. "Look, I don't know what you ran from, but that baby's dying. Let me help you. Please." Her lips parted, trembling as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Then she whispered something, soft, melodic, and unfamiliar. Marcus caught only one word that sounded close to English. "Cold." "Yeah," he said, nodding. "Too damn cold." He reached for the baby, moving slowly. She hesitated, then shifted the child toward him. The moment his hands touched the infant, he felt it, the faintest pulse of warmth, like a flicker of life refusing to go out. Marcus pressed the coat tighter around the child. "Hang in there, little one." When he looked up again, the girl was watching him with a mix of suspicion and gratitude. Her eyes, bright blue, ringed with silver, reflected the dim lights above. There was intelligence there, but also something older, something instinctive. "What's your name?" he asked. She tilted her head, clearly not understanding. He pointed to himself. "Marcus." She studied him for a moment, then tapped her chest lightly. "Zura, Zura," he repeated. "All right, Zura, we're getting out of here." As he stood, the floor creaked beneath him. The temperature felt like it dropped another few degrees. He could see frost crawling up the walls, thin patterns like veins of ice. The station's temperature regulators had failed completely in this section. Staying meant death. He adjusted the coat around the baby, holding the child close to his chest. "You coming?" Zura hesitated again. Her gaze darted down the corridor, then back to him. Marcus didn't need a translator to read the fear in her eyes. She wasn't just cold, she was hiding. He sighed. "Whatever you're running from, it ain't gonna matter if we freeze here." She stared at him another second, then took a shaky breath and stood. Her movements were unsteady, each step a quiet test of trust. They started walking, slow and cautious. The corridor stretched before them like a tunnel through a glacier. Pipes hissed overhead, spilling thin vapor that swirled around their feet. The baby whimpered softly, a sound so faint Marcus almost missed it. "Still with us," he murmured. "That's good." Zura glanced at him, her voice a faint whisper. "Human? Baby?" He looked at the child in his arms. "Half, maybe? I don't know. Doesn't matter right now." Zura's brow furrowed, confusion deepening. "Cold. Kill. If we don't move fast, yeah." They reached a pressure hatch, its surface glazed with ice. Marcus hit the manual release, gritting his teeth as the lever resisted. Metal groaned, then gave way with a hiss. Warm air spilled out, thin, recycled, but it felt like salvation. Zura blinked at the rush of heat, shoulders relaxing slightly. Marcus motioned for her to go first. "After you." She stepped through, turning once to glance back at him. For the first time, he thought he saw something human in her expression. Fear, yes, but also hope. Marcus followed her in, sealing the hatch behind them. The temperature gauge blinked up a few degrees. The baby stirred, faintly crying, its voice small but alive. Marcus exhaled, tension draining from his body. "We made it," he whispered, though part of him knew this was only the beginning. The warmth of the corridor was almost painful after the frost zone. Marcus's skin prickled as feeling returned to his fingers. Zura followed close behind, her movements cautious, her silver blue eyes scanning everything. The infant in Marcus's arms whimpered softly, the sound fragile but alive. He adjusted his coat around the child, whispering, "You're all right now. We got you." They entered the maintenance hub, a small circular chamber lined with humming consoles and supply crates. Marcus laid the baby on a folded blanket near a heating vent. The child's color deepened slightly, still pale but breathing stronger. Zura crouched beside him, her shimmering fingers brushing over the baby's face. The way she looked at it, gentle, terrified, protective, made Marcus's throat tighten. "Zura," he said carefully, "we need to take the kid to Med. The docs can help." Her gaze snapped up, panicked. No, Med, bad." Marcus frowned. "Bad? You mean dangerous?" She nodded fast, clutching the coat again. "They take, no come back." He froze, processing her words. The idea wasn't impossible. The station's medical division had strict quarantine protocols. Anything alien was treated as a biohazard first, a life second. If Zura was right, taking the baby there might mean losing it forever. He rubbed his temples. Damn it! Before he could say more, a voice echoed from the hall outside. "Engineering! That you, Delane?" Marcus tensed. It was Officer Enkem, Security Patrol. He whispered to Zura, "Stay quiet, don't move." The door slid open. Enkem stepped inside, her uniform crisp, eyes sharp. "You weren't logged on your terminal, Marcus. Protocol says—" She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the girl. "Who the hell is that?" Marcus forced a laugh. Long story. Found her lost in the frost zone." Enkem's gaze hardened. "In the restricted sector. You know that area's off limits." She tapped her wrist console. "Name?" Zura flinched, instinctively shielding the baby. Enkem's eyes caught the motion, and her expression changed. "Wait, is that—" Marcus stepped between them. "She's freezing. That's all you need to know right now." "Marcus, move," Enkem ordered. "If that's an alien infant, you're violating at least 6 safety codes. Quarantine protocol says I have to report this." He met her stare. "You don't understand. The baby was dying. We couldn't just leave them." "Not your call," she snapped. "You bring something foreign onto this station without clearance, and you risk everyone here. I'm not losing my post over your soft heart. The baby whimpered again, and Zura rocked gently, humming that same haunting tune Marcus had heard earlier. The sound filled the room, soft yet heavy, like grief turned into music. For a moment, even Nkem hesitated. Marcus took a slow breath. Please, just give me a few hours. Let me stabilize them, then I'll come clean. If you report it now, that baby won't survive the testing. Nkem's jaw tightened. You're asking me to break regulation. I'm asking you to be human. The words hung between them. Nkem's gaze shifted to the baby, then to Zura, trembling, clutching Marcus's coat like it was her only shield against the universe. Something flickered in the officer's eyes. Memory, maybe mercy. She sighed. You've got 6 hours, Delane. After that, I can't cover for you. Marcus nodded. That's all I need. Nkem turned to leave, muttering, You're lucky I got a conscience. The door slid shut behind her, and silence settled again. Zura looked at Marcus, uncertain. Help? He exhaled. Maybe, for now. He looked down at the baby, the smallest breath rising and falling beneath his coat. His grandmother's words echoed faintly in his mind. Warmth ain't just heat, it's care. But on New Lagos Station, care could get a man killed. Marcus paced the narrow quarters just off the maintenance wing, every step echoing off cold steel and cracked plastic tiles. The 6 hours Nkem had given him ticked down like a slow leak in a pressure valve. Zura sat curled in the corner, the infant in her arms wrapped tightly in his coat. Her humming had grown quieter, more like a prayer than a song. He tapped his comm unit again. Come on, pick up. A soft chime. Then, Marcus Delane, came the familiar voice, weathered and clear. Calling me this early, child. Something broken, or are you? He exhaled. Might be both, Doc. Dr. Amara Kinte didn't need more explanation. She was already on her way. Within minutes the door slid open, and the old woman stepped in like she owned the air around her. White locks tied back, robes layered over her work suit, her presence radiated warmth that not even the station's cold could touch. Her eyes moved immediately to the child in Zura's arms. She said nothing at first. She simply walked over and knelt beside them, gaze steady, soft hands hovering over the infant without touching. This baby is not like anything I've seen, she murmured, but it's alive. That matters most. Zura looked between Marcus and the older woman, wary but silent. She doesn't speak much English, Marcus explained. Name's Zura. Found her in the frost zone, wrapped the baby in my coat. Protected it like it was hers, Amara finished. She nodded slowly. And now it's yours too. Marcus stiffened. I didn't sign up for that. Amara stood. None of us did. But the world doesn't wait for permission to break your plans. It just hands you the pieces and watches what you build. He rubbed the back of his neck. You think I did the right thing? She turned to him with that same gaze she'd used on him since his apprentice days. You're asking me if saving a life was right. Marcus, your ancestors crossed oceans in chains and still found a way to hold babies and sing them to sleep. You were born of people who survived ice without ships, fire without shelter. Don't question your instinct to care. That's legacy, not weakness. Her words settled into his bones. I don't know what to do, he admitted. Nkem gave me time, but when it runs out, she'll report it, Amara finished. And this baby, whatever it is, will disappear behind closed doors. Zura shifted, clearly understanding more than she let on. She tightened her hold on the infant, eyes wide with fear. Is there anywhere safe? Marcus asked. Not on this station, Amara replied. But safety isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a person. Sometimes it's a decision. He sat down heavily on the crate nearest him. I'm tired, Doc. I keep thinking about Earth. My grandma's porch in Chicago colony. The stories she used to tell me. About how cold couldn't kill you if your people kept you warm. That's because it couldn't, she said. We survived by sharing heat, son. And heat ain't just fire. It's presence. It's memory. It's action. That coat you lost? He nodded. She smiled. You didn't lose it. You passed it on. He looked at Zura again, this time with different eyes. She wasn't just a girl on the run. She was someone trying to protect what mattered, just like him. What would you do if you were me? He asked. Amara leaned in, voice low. I'd stop waiting for permission to be human, and I'd protect that child like it held the future, because maybe it does. Marcus nodded slowly. The clock was ticking, but now he wasn't just reacting. He was choosing. Hours passed in quiet tension. The heating unit hummed softly in the background, doing its best to push back the cold creeping through the station walls. Marcus sat cross-legged across from Zura, arms resting on his knees, eyes on the infant still wrapped in his coat. The child's breathing was steadier now, skin a shade warmer, cheeks tinged with faint color. Zura hadn't said much since Dr. Kinter left, only short phrases, often punctuated by glances toward the sealed door. She was waiting for something, or fearing it. Marcus tried again. "Zura, who is the baby?" Her lips moved without sound at first, as if the words had weight. Then she whispered, "My blood, my kin. You mean your child?" She shook her head. "No, not born from me, but same heart, same people." He leaned forward, voice calm. "What happened to them?" Zura's eyes flickered. She pulled the infant closer, brushing its brow with trembling fingers. "Tishala, my moon. Cold, quiet. We lived hidden. After war, after the stars broke apart. Human seed came in drift ship, wounded, alone." Marcus frowned. "You mean a human crashed there?" She nodded. "He was warm, broken, but kind. Gave us knowledge, fire, music." Her voice grew steadier with each word, like each memory pulled her closer to strength. "Some feared him, but others loved him." Marcus's throat tightened. "And the baby?" Zura's eyes dropped to the child. "He is what's left, the last. When they came," her voice cracked, "they came with black suits, ships like knives. Said we were not allowed. Said we were abomination." He didn't need her to explain further. It was the same story written 1,000 ways across human history. Colonies established, rules enforced, love criminalized when it crossed imagined lines. "They killed them?" he asked. Zura nodded. "Burned homes, took bodies. I ran. With him. Only him." Marcus closed his eyes, fists clenching. "And now they'll want to do the same here." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Do humans always fear what they make?" The question hung in the air, heavier than gravity. "No," he said finally. "Not always. But we've got a habit of forgetting how to love what we don't understand." Zura didn't respond, but her shoulders eased just slightly, as if the truth she carried had been too heavy to bear alone. Marcus leaned back, letting the silence stretch. He needed time to think, to process what she'd just shared, but he also needed to know what came next. "Zura," he said, "do you have a plan? Somewhere you were going?" She shook her head. "Only away, only warm." "Well, warm's a start," he said, cracking a tired smile. "But it won't be enough soon." Her head tilted. "Why help us?" He met her gaze. "Because you did. You didn't run with the coat. You stayed and protected that child, that matters. And because I was raised by a woman who said you don't ask where someone came from before giving them a blanket." Zura blinked, lips twitching with the faintest trace of understanding. "We're not all monsters," he added. She nodded slowly. "I know. One of you loved us once." Marcus stood, stretching his stiff legs. "Then maybe one of us can help again." As he turned toward the console, he didn't know exactly what he was looking for, only that somewhere on this station was a chance for that child to live. And now it was his job to find it. Marcus stared at the flickering monitor in front of him. The station's internal schematics glowed in dull blue light, each sector a maze of compartments, maintenance shafts, and pressure seals. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe a path out, maybe a hiding place, maybe a miracle. Zura sat silently behind him, cradling the baby. The infant slept now, its breathing slow and steady. The coat remained wrapped tight, worn edges dusted with dried frost. Marcus's mind churned. Protocol, logic, law. None of it seemed to apply anymore. All the training, all the safety drills, the technical procedures, none of that taught him how to deal with a life that didn't fit inside regulations. He rubbed his face, muttering, "Damn this place." Zura looked up. "You are angry." He turned halfway toward her. "Yeah, I am, not at you, just everything, this station, the rules, the way people act like surviving means forgetting how to feel." She tilted her head. "Feel like warmth?" He managed a bitter laugh. "Exactly. We build these cold metal homes in the sky, spend years keeping air breathable and systems running, and somewhere along the way we stop looking out for each other." Zura's eyes followed him quietly. "Your people. Forget?" "Not all of us," he said, "but too many." She leaned over the baby, her voice soft. "You did not forget." Marcus went quiet. He thought about the last few years, how he'd buried himself in routine after that failed mission to Titan's orphan sector. He hadn't saved the refugees then. Bureaucracy had tied his hands, and the guilt still clung like smoke. He had promised himself he wouldn't make that mistake again, but promises meant nothing unless he acted on them. "Look," he said, motioning toward the screen. "There's a decommissioned storage wing below the hydroponics deck. Nobody checks it. If I reroute the heat lines, we can keep the baby warm. It'll buy us time." Zura nodded slowly. "You are choosing." He paused. "Choosing what?" "To be more than afraid." He looked at her. Those words cut deeper than he expected. She wasn't just pointing out his bravery. She was recognizing a shift. That maybe, just maybe, Marcus was becoming the man he'd once hoped to be. "I'm trying," he said, "but it won't matter if the rest of the station turns on us." Zura's voice was steady. "Then find those who did not forget." The thought landed hard. He wasn't alone. He had people. Folks who remembered what community meant. People raised like him, taught to reach out before shutting down. Engineers, mechanics, janitors, those who kept the station alive but were never invited to the high-level briefings. Marcus stood. "I know some people. They'll help. Quietly. You trust them?" He nodded. "With my life." Zura looked back at the infant. "Then I trust you." The words settled in his chest like a weight and a blessing. No one had said that to him in years, not with that kind of clarity. He didn't respond right away. Just watched the baby's tiny chest rise and fall, listened to the hum of a world held together by steel and hope. Finally, he turned back to the console, pulling up encrypted comms. "It's time to call in some old debts," he muttered. "If we're going to protect this child, we'll need more than heat. We'll need people who remember what it means to be human." And deep down he knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about redemption. Marcus moved quickly through the service tunnels, his breath steady, his mind focused. The shadows clung to the corners of each corridor, and the scent of coolant lingered in the recycled air. He kept his hood up, not because of the cold, but to stay invisible. Zura and the baby were hidden back in the temporary shelter he'd rigged, insulated and wired with a stolen heat conduit. It wasn't much, but it was life. Now, he needed allies. He turned down a maintenance shaft and tapped twice on the bulkhead near a broken vent. Seconds later, the panel slid open. A man stepped out, dark skin, gold tooth glinting under the hallway lights, eyes sharp with suspicion. "Marcus?" the man asked. "Jalil," Marcus replied. "I need a favor, the kind that makes you sweat." Jalil narrowed his eyes. "Ain't seen you since the cargo fire. You running from something or running for something?" Marcus hesitated. "Both." That was enough. Jalil stepped aside. Inside the makeshift lounge, a few other engineers sat around a table made of salvaged panels. Old soul beats played low from a cracked speaker, and the smell of fried soy paste filled the air. He knew every face in that room. Blue-collar folk, mostly black, raised on colony grit and ancestral wisdom. They didn't ask for much, just peace, space, and respect. "All right," Jalil said, clapping his hands once. "You got 10 minutes, talk." Marcus didn't waste words. He told them everything, about Zura, the infant, the frost zone, Officer Enkem's warning, and Dr. Kinte's counsel. He didn't hide his fear, or his purpose. When he finished, silence fell. One of the older women, Auntie Bess, leaned back with a sigh. "It ain't the first time this station tried to toss out what it didn't understand." "Facts," muttered one of the welders. "They love rules till a life don't fit inside 'em." "You asking us to hide an alien baby?" someone asked. "I'm asking you to protect a child," Marcus replied. "One that wouldn't survive a second in the labs, one that's already being hunted." "Sound familiar?" A murmur moved through the room. Heads nodded, shoulders squared. These were the descendants of the forgotten, the left behind. They didn't need a lecture on injustice. They lived it. Auntie Bess reached over and poured a cup of lukewarm tea. "Child's a child. Don't care if it's got gills or glows in the dark. We ain't turning our backs." Another voice spoke. Milo, the comms tech. "I can jam the internal trackers, give you all a 3-hour blackout window every cycle, but someone's got to run diversion." "I'll do it," said Jalil. "Ain't the first time I've danced past a scanner." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief exactly, but foundation, the kind you build something on. "We'll rotate watch," Auntie Bess added. You need medical. I got old supplies from when my niece was pregnant. We keep this quiet. We keep this sacred. Marcus swallowed. Thank you, all of you. Jalil shrugged. We ain't saints, Marcus, but we remember what it's like to be left in the cold. Nobody deserves that, not again. They broke up the meeting quietly. No handshakes, no cheers, just shared looks and unspoken trust. As Marcus made his way back toward the hidden shelter, he realized something. They weren't just helping him protect that baby. They were helping him become the kind of man who could. Marcus stepped into the dimly lit storage room. The only sound, the soft hum of old power lines running through the walls. The room smelled of rust and dust, but it was warm. Too warm, almost. A small heater hummed in the corner, radiating enough heat to create a space of refuge amid the harsh chill of the station's core. He glanced back at the makeshift shelter he'd set up for Zura and the baby. The walls were lined with insulation, a patchwork of materials scavenged from nearby sectors. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep the cold at bay, for now. He hadn't slept in hours, but there was no time for that. Not anymore. Zura was curled up in the corner, the baby nestled in her arms. She looked up when Marcus entered, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude and unspoken fear. The child had been still for a while, but Marcus knew better than to trust that silence. "How's he doing?" Marcus asked, kneeling beside her. Zura nodded. Still fragile, but warm. She shifted the baby slightly, making sure the coat stayed wrapped tightly around the tiny form. "He grows stronger." "Yes?" Marcus gently touched the baby's forehead. Warmth, a tiny flicker of life, a thread of hope that had been fading fast. "He's holding on," Marcus murmured, glancing over at the heater. "But that's not enough." Zura's brow furrowed. "Not enough, for what? We need a backup plan. If the heat goes out again, if someone finds us breeds—" He didn't finish the thought. The truth was too heavy to speak aloud. Zura understood anyway. She had been running her whole life, always one step ahead of death, of those who hunted her, of the broken system that had turned her people into ghosts. The baby was her hope, her future. Marcus clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the situation pressed down on him. But in that moment he also felt something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. It was warmth, yes, but not just the heat of the room, not just the body heat shared between him and Zura as they huddled together for survival. It was the warmth of responsibility, the kind of warmth that came from choosing to protect something, not because he had to, but because he believed it was right. "We're not alone in this," he said, more to himself than to Zura. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Marcus stood and paced toward the small table near the corner. On it were a few basic tools, some wires, and a stack of old engineering blueprints. It wasn't much, but it was enough for him to plan their next move. He needed to create a secure line of communication with the few people he could still trust, people who had agreed to help them hide, to shield them from the cold and the relentless threat of those who would see them vanish. "I've been reaching out," Marcus said, tapping the blueprint with a finger. "There's a way we can keep the baby safe for longer. It won't be perfect, but it'll buy us time. It'll be enough to keep the heat running, to keep the scans from finding us." Zura's eyes sparkled with something akin to hope. Fragile, but there. "You will do this?" "I have to," Marcus replied. "If not me, then who? If not now, then when?" Her lips parted, as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. Instead, she simply nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about dignity. It was about fighting for a future that might never come unless they made it happen. "I'll go to the hydroponics deck tonight," Marcus said, turning back to face her. "I can reroute the coolant lines. That should keep things stable for at least a few hours. But we'll need to keep moving once we're found out." Zura didn't ask how long they could stay hidden. She already knew the answer. In a place like New Lagos Station, there was no true sanctuary. There was only temporary refuge, a series of small moments strung together, each one teetering on the edge of danger. Marcus walked to the door, his body tense, ready for whatever came next. But as he reached for the handle, he paused and looked back at Zura and the baby. In that moment, he realized something. This wasn't just about protecting a child. It wasn't just about keeping the heat running or hiding in the shadows. It was about reclaiming the warmth that had been stripped away from them all. About showing that no matter what the world threw at them, they could still choose to hold on to their humanity. "Stay here. I'll be back soon," Marcus said, voice firm. Zura nodded once more, clutching the baby tighter. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he stepped into the corridor, ready to fight for whatever warmth he could find. Marcus's footsteps echoed as he made his way through the dimly lit corridors of New Lagos Station. The air was heavy, laced with the metallic scent of recycled oxygen and the constant hum of the station's old systems. His heart pounded in his chest, but it wasn't from the physical exertion. It was the waiting, the anticipation of what might come next. He reached the service hatch leading to the lower maintenance deck, the one he'd told Zura he'd use to reroute the coolant lines. The moment his fingers brushed the cold metal, a sharp noise broke the silence. Voices, coming from the shadows just ahead. Marcus froze. 2 security officers appeared, walking towards him with purpose. Their eyes narrowed when they saw him, and instinctively he reached for his comm unit. He hadn't been spotted yet, but they were getting closer. "Delane," one of them called out, "you're supposed to be off the grid. What the hell are you doing here?" He cursed under his breath. He didn't have much time. The last thing he needed was a confrontation, especially when the baby and Zura were relying on him. His mind raced, searching for an escape, but he had no choice but to face them. "Just making a repair," Marcus replied casually, keeping his voice steady. "Is there a problem?" The second officer took a step forward, eyes scanning him suspiciously. "You're lying. You've been avoiding the logs for the last few shifts, and you're out here in a restricted sector." He gestured toward the hatch. "We need to know what's going on." Marcus's pulse quickened. He had to act fast. "Look, I don't have time for this," he said, moving past them. "I've got a job to finish." One of the officers grabbed his arm, halting him. "Not so fast, Delane. You're not going anywhere until we get some answers." Panic surged through Marcus. He jerked his arm back, pushing the officer off him, but before he could react, another figure stepped from the shadows. It was Nkem, the officer who had given him the 6-hour window earlier. She looked him up and down, her expression unreadable. "Marcus," she said softly, almost too softly. "I knew this would happen." Her voice was filled with an edge he hadn't expected. "I gave you time, and you wasted it." He took a step back, his mind racing. "Nkem, listen to me. You don't understand." "No," she interrupted, her eyes cold. "You don't understand. This isn't just about you anymore." She motioned for the officers to close in. "You've put us all at risk. The baby, the alien, whatever it is, should never have been allowed to stay here." "You don't know what you're talking about," Marcus said, his voice low but fierce. "This isn't about them. This is about a life, a child, a future." Nkem shook her head, her lips curling into a tight line. "You think you're saving it? You're playing with fire, Marcus. You've compromised everything." He didn't have time for her moralizing. The baby, Zura. They were depending on him. "Get out of my way," Marcus spat, his chest tightening. But Nkem didn't move. "I can't let you do this. You've crossed a line. The station's already alerted. There's no running from this." The officers moved in on either side of him, and before Marcus could react, he felt the cold press of cuffs around his wrists. The world seemed to slow for a moment, his thoughts racing, each second a desperate plea for a way out. But the more he struggled, the tighter the grip became. "You think I want this?" Marcus growled, his voice filled with frustration. "You think I wanted to break every damn rule to protect a kid? To protect life?" Nkem's eyes softened for a moment, just a flicker of something human before the mask fell again. "You're not the only one who's lost someone, Marcus. But this is bigger than you. Bigger than a kid." They pulled him down the hall, each step dragging him further from the shelter, from the safety of Zura and the baby. His heart raced as he realized that the clock was ticking, and he had no idea if he could stop it from running out. Marcus's world spun in silence. The cold metallic walls of the holding cell reflected the dim light above him in uneven flashes, as if the station itself was watching him with judgmental eyes. His hands were cuffed to a cold steel bench, the restraints tight enough to bite into his skin, but he barely felt the pain anymore. All he could focus on was the thought that he might not make it out of here in time to save Zura and the baby. The coldness of the room mirrored the stillness in his mind. He leaned his head back against the wall, staring up at the sterile ceiling. The harshness of the situation seemed to drown out everything. He had known it was risky. He had known that helping Zura, helping the child, could end with him in this very position, but it didn't matter. His heart beat for the cause. He had chosen this path, and now it was too late to turn back. But did he choose this? Or had it been chosen for him from the moment Zura entered his life, the moment he decided to act against the system that had always sought to divide, categorize, and destroy? The question gnawed at him like a hunger that wouldn't be satisfied. He exhaled slowly, feeling the emptiness settle inside him. The voice of his grandmother echoed in his mind, her words haunting him even now. We are who we choose to be, not who the world tells us to be. But what if the world made those choices impossible? What if the only way to survive was to forget, to turn your back on those in need? Marcus, the voice broke his thoughts. It was faint, almost a whisper, but he recognized it immediately. Zura. He jerked forward, straining against the cuffs as he tried to focus on the sound. Zura, he croaked, his voice raw from disuse. Is that you? Her figure appeared in the dim light beyond the cell door, her face just visible through the small viewport. Her eyes, wide with fear and urgency, locked with his. She looked as if she had been running or maybe hiding. Both, probably. She was trembling, but she stood firm. I can't stay long, she whispered, her voice shaking. They're coming. Her words caught in her throat. I don't know how much time we have. Marcus felt a sudden, sharp pang in his chest. He had failed her. He had failed the baby. Zura, no, he whispered back, his voice breaking. She shook her head, refusing to let him finish. No time for regrets, Marcus. You gave me time, you gave us a chance, that's all that matters. He could feel the weight of her words in his chest, as if they were squeezing the air from his lungs. But I didn't protect you. I didn't keep you safe. Life doesn't always give us guarantees, Zura said, her voice quiet but resolute. But we keep fighting anyway. You've already given us more than anyone else would. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the tears prickle behind his lids. The anger, the guilt, the fear. It was all so overwhelming. He wanted to break free. He wanted to do something, anything, to make things right. But his hands were tied. He was trapped in this small, lifeless room, separated from the people he was trying to save. Marcus, listen to me, Zura continued, her voice firm. You don't have to be here for this to end, but you've made a difference, even if you never see the outcome. You've already shown them the power of a choice. His heart clenched. What? What do you mean? Zura's eyes darkened. I'm not alone. There are others who have seen what you've done. The ones you reached out to, they understand. They won't let this stand. Marcus exhaled sharply, a flicker of hope igniting within him. There were people who had seen what was happening, people who would fight for the baby, for Zura, for what was right. He wasn't alone. The door to the cell clicked. The lock was turning. Footsteps echoed from the hallway outside. Zura's face hardened, and she took a step back, disappearing from view. Stay strong, Marcus, she whispered just before she was gone. His heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what was coming next, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't done yet. He would fight. He would find a way. And he would not let Zura's faith in him go to waste. The lock disengaged with a hollow click, and Marcus tensed, every muscle bracing for confrontation. The door didn't burst open. Instead, it creaked slowly, cautiously. A silhouette appeared in the dim light, broad shoulders, steady stance. Stay quiet, whispered a familiar voice. Marcus blinked, squinting through the shadows. It was Jalil. He stepped inside quickly, leaving the door ajar just enough to let a sliver of corridor light spill in. What the hell are you doing here? Marcus whispered, heart racing. Returning the favor, Jalil muttered, pulling a makeshift keycard from his belt. Turns out you've made a lot of quiet friends. Word got out what happened. Some of us ain't okay with it. Marcus felt a flicker of relief. Zura and the baby, are they safe? For now, Jalil replied. But you weren't the only one they were tracking. After they dragged you off, scanners pinged their location. We moved them, but it's just a matter of time before Station Command sweeps the whole level. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Then we've got to get them off station. Now you're thinking right, Jalil said, working the cuffs. There's an old cargo sled docked on Subdeck 6. Decommissioned years ago, but I've been patching it together on my off days. He glanced up with a grin. Never thought it'd be for this. The cuffs popped open. Marcus rubbed his wrists, the pain sharpening his focus. We'll need access codes, he said, and flight clearance, ghost-level clearance. I know someone who can fake a launch manifest. Auntie Bess is already on it. Bert, you'll need to move fast. Security's doubling patrols. Since your arrest, you won't get a second shot. Marcus stood, already planning 10 steps ahead. We'll need to time the station's rotation. A blind spot opens every 87 seconds near the thermal ducts on Deck 6. If we launch during that window, no signature, Jalil finished. Exactly. They moved through the corridor like smoke, slipping between shadows. The deeper they went into the station's belly, the more familiar the sounds became. Pipes groaning, old machinery humming, the occasional hiss of steam. By the time they reached the lower access point, Zura was waiting. She crouched behind a vent shaft, the baby pressed tightly against her chest, wrapped again in Marcus's coat. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Marcus," she breathed. He reached her in 2 strides. "We're leaving. Now." Zura nodded. No hesitation in her face. Just resolve. The kind that comes from knowing there's no turning back. Jalil handed Marcus a small comm chip. "Patch this into the sled once you're inside. It'll override the main locks and spoof the ID." Marcus pocketed it. "What about you?" Jalil smirked. "I'll stall command, run interference, just make it count." They exchanged a look, one built from trust, built from shared struggle. Then Marcus turned to Zura. "We stick to the ducts, no noise." No hesitation. Zura clutched the baby and followed close as they slipped into the maintenance tunnel. The crawl space was tight, barely enough for them to move single file. Sweat beaded on Marcus's brow despite the chill. Each meter forward was a battle against time. Finally they reached the sled bay. The door loomed before them, rusted, patched, forgotten. Marcus slid the comm chip into the terminal. For a moment nothing happened. Then the light blinked green. Zura gasped. "We made it." He nodded, stepping inside. The air was stale, but the systems hummed to life under his touch. As the bay doors began to cycle open, alarms started to wail in the distance. "They know," Zura whispered. "Then let's make it worth the chase," Marcus said, locking the hatch behind them. The bay doors slid open with a deep groan, revealing the expanse of cold, sterile space beyond. The cargo sled hummed to life as Marcus swiftly powered it up. He quickly checked the console. All systems were ago, but it was clear the countdown was beginning. They had no more than a few minutes before the station's security forces figured out where they were and initiated lockdown. Zura stood in the corner, clutching the baby tightly against her chest, her breath shallow with anticipation. Her eyes flickered nervously to the bay door as Marcus adjusted the flight path. "Ready?" Marcus asked, turning toward her, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Zura nodded, her jaw set, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. "I trust you." Marcus didn't answer, instead punching in the final coordinates. The sled rumbled beneath them, pushing forward toward the primary airlock. They moved slowly, quietly, trying to blend into the darkness. Their escape was a delicate dance. If they were too quick, they'd trigger the station's defenses. Too slow, and they'd be trapped inside a confined space, easy targets for the armed forces hunting them. 50 meters to the launch window, Marcus muttered under his breath, eyes glued to the small console. "We've got one shot." The air was thick with tension, every sound amplified. The cold metal walls of the corridor stretched ahead, lined with pipes that rattled intermittently. The sled slid forward, its engines barely making a sound. But behind them, the station's alarms grew louder, closer. Marcus could feel his pulse in his ears, his focus narrowed on the path ahead. They were nearing the critical blind spot, the place where the station's scanners couldn't detect them due to the orientation of the outer hull. Just a few more seconds. 30 meters, he whispered. He could see the tension building on Zura's face, her eyes darting to the emergency exits, as if expecting to see armed guards burst in at any moment. "Hold tight," Marcus added, his grip tightening on the controls. The station seemed to hold its breath as they reached the threshold. Just as the last few meters came into view, Marcus felt a sudden chill run down his spine. The sled shuddered slightly as it passed into the blind spot. The ship was free from immediate detection, but not for long. 10 meters, he said, voice steady but urgent. Behind them, the sound of footsteps and yelling echoed. Security was closing in. They had seconds. Zura's breathing quickened, but she stayed calm, her focus solely on the baby, her protectorate. "We need to move faster." Marcus didn't need any more encouragement. He slammed the throttle forward, sending the sled rocketing toward the open airlock ahead. The ship jolted as the force pushed them into the vacuum of space, the sled's metal frame rattling in protest. The cold vacuum greeted them instantly, and the control console beeped wildly, signaling the successful ejection from the station's confines. But they weren't free yet. "Evasive maneuvers," Marcus called out, punching the emergency override. "We've got company." The sled jolted again as Marcus swerved to avoid an incoming blast of station fire. A sudden lurch sent them spinning, and the world outside became a blur of dark space, the distant stars twinkling coldly. The sled's hull creaked as the force of the movement strained its old frame, but they were still alive. "Hold on!" Marcus shouted, his heart racing. He could feel the controls slipping from his hands, but as the sled settled into its new course, he could see the dim outline of the station slowly falling away. The danger that had chased them now, nothing more than a small speck in the distance. Zura gasped. "We did it!" Marcus leaned back, his body tense, but there was a small flicker of relief. "We're not there yet, but we're out of the station. We've bought some time." The sled coasted through the vast emptiness, and Marcus took a deep breath. The worst wasn't over, but they had survived. For now, that was enough. The cold vacuum outside felt like a reminder that life out here was fragile, fleeting, but for Marcus and Zura it was a second chance. A chance to fight for what mattered, a chance to protect the future. And no matter what came next, he knew they had won the first battle. The sled coasted through the silent expanse of space, leaving the burning orb of New Lagos Station far behind. Outside, the void stretched endlessly, punctuated only by distant stars. The ship's internal systems hummed steadily, the soft pulse of the engine a lullaby to the exhausted passengers within. Marcus sat in the pilot's seat, hands steady on the controls but his mind racing. They had escaped the station's clutches, but the real danger was just beginning. He stole a glance at Zura, who sat quietly beside him, holding the baby close. The child, though still fragile, was breathing evenly now, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Zura met his eyes for a moment, her expression unreadable, but the faintest spark of hope shone in her gaze. It was a look Marcus had seen before, but this time it was different. This time, it wasn't just about survival. It was about something bigger. The baby shifted in her arms, a faint whimper escaping its lips. Zura gently rocked it back and forth, her voice low as she murmured a soft lullaby, one Marcus hadn't heard before. The sound was both haunting and beautiful, filled with an emotion that transcended language. "Do you think we're safe now?" Marcus asked, his voice almost a whisper. Zura didn't answer right away. She seemed to be lost in thought, her fingers gently caressing the baby's head. Then, after a long pause, she finally spoke. "We're not safe anywhere, Marcus, not yet, but this—" She glanced down at the child, her expression softening. "This is the future. This is what we fight for." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. He had known the stakes from the beginning, but hearing her say it out loud made it all the more real. The child was the last of its kind, a symbol of something lost and yet to be rebuilt. Zura had protected it with everything she had, and now it was his turn to protect them both. "We can't stay in hiding forever," Marcus said. "We need a plan, something more than just running." Zura nodded, her eyes meeting his with a quiet understanding. "I've been thinking about that. About what we do next." "What do you mean?" She shifted the baby slightly, adjusting its position in her arms. "The child. He's not just the last of my people. He's the key to something bigger. Something the station didn't want us to know." Marcus's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, the key?" Zura's voice dropped to a hushed whisper. "The baby's blood. It's connected to the station's energy core. When he was born, his DNA absorbed a rare, unstable element from my world. It's why the station's systems were drawn to him, why they were trying to study him. He's more than just an infant. He's the bridge between our worlds." Marcus felt the weight of her words sink in, the implications unfolding in his mind like a slow-moving storm. "Are you saying the baby can power the station?" Zura's gaze was unwavering. "Not just the station, the entire system. His blood can harness energy in a way we've never seen before. It's dangerous, but it could also change everything." Marcus's head spun as the realization hit him. The child wasn't just a refugee or a survivor. It was a living key to something far more powerful, something that could reshape the future of humanity and the alien species that had once shared their galaxy. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. Zura's eyes softened as she looked at him, her voice filled with quiet resolve. "Now, we find a way to protect him, and then we decide what to do with the power he holds. It won't be easy. There are forces that will stop at nothing to get him, but we're not alone anymore. We have allies. And together, we'll make sure this child's power is used to build a new future, not destroy it. Marcus nodded slowly, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on his shoulders. The stakes had never been higher. But as he looked at Zura, the baby, and the endless void of space stretching before them, something shifted inside him. They weren't just running anymore. They were fighting for something that mattered. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus knew he wasn't alone. "We'll do it," he said, his voice steady with newfound determination. "We'll protect him. We'll protect each other." Zura smiled faintly, her eyes filled with a quiet, fierce hope. Together. And as the sled hurtled deeper into the unknown, they knew the battle for the future had only just begun. The quiet hum of the sled's engines was the only sound in the cold void of space. The vast, endless stretch of stars outside the small cockpit window felt both distant and suffocating, a reminder that the future was as uncertain as the darkness that surrounded them. But inside the sled, there was a sense of calm, an understanding that they had made it this far and that there was still a path forward. Marcus sat in the pilot's seat, his hands resting lightly on the controls. Zura was beside him, the baby once again wrapped in Marcus's coat, held close against her chest. The child's soft breathing was the only reminder of the fragility of their situation, of how much they still had to protect. For the first time since they'd left New Lagos Station, Marcus allowed himself to relax. It wasn't much, but it was enough. They had escaped the immediate danger, and now they had time. Time to plan, time to think. "Zura," Marcus said quietly, breaking the silence. She glanced over at him, her eyes tired but steady. "Yes? I've been thinking," he began, his voice slow. "When we first met, I was just trying to help. I thought the only thing that mattered was survival. I didn't think about what would come after." Zura nodded, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of the baby's coat. "Survival is all we can think about when we're running. But now we must choose." "Yeah," Marcus exhaled. "It's not just about running anymore, is it? It's about what comes next. What we do with this child, with the power he holds. What we do with our lives." Zura's gaze grew soft as she looked down at the baby. "He carries both our pasts and our future. He is the last of my people and the beginning of something new. We cannot waste this chance." Marcus nodded, his thoughts racing. "I don't know what the future holds, Zura, but I do know one thing. We're going to do this together." "You're not alone." Zura smiled, a quiet, fragile smile that spoke volumes. "And neither are you." A sudden flash of light illuminated the cockpit, and Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He quickly glanced at the navigation panel. Nothing unusual, just the occasional flare from a distant star or a passing comet. But the light felt like a sign, a reminder that they were still in the vastness of space, where danger could come from any direction. As the sled glided further into the unknown, Marcus allowed himself one more glance at the coat wrapped around the baby. It was the same coat he had lost in the frost zone, the coat that had been a symbol of his family's legacy. It was more than just a piece of clothing. It was a promise to protect, a promise to fight for a future no matter the cost. He reached over and placed a hand gently on Zura's arm. "We'll make sure he grows up safe. We'll make sure he knows what it means to be human, to care for others." Zura looked up at him, her eyes bright with unspoken emotion. "He will know love. He will know warmth. And that is enough." Marcus smiled, his heart swelling with something he hadn't felt in years, hope. They didn't have all the answers, and they didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but they had each other. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. "Let's go home," Marcus said quietly, his voice filled with resolve. Zura nodded. Home. As the sled continued to drift through the cold expanse, the future was uncertain. But in that moment, as the stars twinkled silently around them, it didn't matter. They had each other. And the coat, a symbol of their shared struggle, lay between them, a silent promise that they would face whatever came next, together.